Like we live in this weird world now, and everybody's got to be like busy all the fucking time, with basically nonsense. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like again, like you're saying, like there's a lot of value in going out. I mean, I'm also somebody who's like, I've been a recovering agoraphobic, basically, right? Like I have a very high degree of anxiety in my life. So, and I'm an introvert, so I spend a lot of time inside, like already. But there was one thing I used to do a lot as a kid, which is I used to lie on my bed and throw this like Nerf ball against the ceiling and catch it. And I would just like do that for like 45 minutes. And I mean, yeah, I'm throwing the ball, but what's actually happening the entire time is like, I mean, like people talk about, I say people, meaning myself as well, like, especially when I was younger, thinking about where ideas come from, for example, we were talking about that earlier. And it's like, well, if you don't make the space for them to arrive, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're usually always spontaneous. I mean, I got just as many out of like dreams and just like walking around as anywhere else. But there's also something to be said about actually setting aside time, like you're saying, to actually like let your brain like spit some shit out at you and like see what happens, like just let it barf out some sentences and like see how you feel about it. Like
that's kind of like what meditation, at least like the way I understand what my dad has taught me and the stuff that I've read, like that's kind of what meditation is like it's not about necessarily like calming yourself down, but it's just, I mean, it is by the nature of it, like you kind of just sit there. But a big thing to me is like it's I guess kind of calming your mind down, but it's putting it more into it, just a state of like just what's the word?
What was that guy in The Simpsons that said, if you're not a human doing, you're not a human being, you're a human doing? Like that. Like I know, like I remember that what came out like in the early 90s or whatever. And I remember seeing that as a kid and like laughing. And I still think it's funny. And I think that's actually kind of maybe what we're talking about, right? It's like that. Like, I mean, it's so, I mean, everything that comes back to The Simpsons at some point. At least for our generations. But like, just the idea that like you're saying, like you're kind of being there in the moment for yourself. Yeah, there we
go. Anyway, sorry. I don't mean to derail where you were going.
I just took my breath away. But yeah, just that idea of like you're saying, like allowing yourself to be bored or allowing yourself to be there for yourself. Basically.
Yeah, and like those are the moments where your mind is not occupied with things to do and you're not focused on anything, or maybe you're just focused on like sitting and breathing, and like because that's such a simple process, like you get into those states, like I forget there's a word for it, I want to say like default mode something or other. Anyway, it's the kind of state where your mind is wandering, right. And you're just like kind of thinking about stuff, but you're not really paying attention to them. Like you just like they're happening, and that's when like stuff kind of comes into your head. Like,
right.
And
for sure.
and but you got to be able to like receive it, kind of thing. Like it's the kind of thing, like I've heard people talk about luck, and they're like, yeah, there's lucky people and lucky, like things just happen. But if you're not able to like capitalize on that opportunity or that luck that happens, like then it doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I guess my only question for people that say that though is like, what does capitalize mean?
Well, like I guess capitalize is maybe not the right word, but just like receive it and be like, hey, that's something that maybe I can use, or
right, yeah, like something I can bring into my life or use, or
you're like acting on it in some way, some shape or form, whether it's writing that idea down for later reference or whatever. But like, like say, you're meditating or whatever, And a big thing, like when I was growing up, I always thought, oh yeah, meditation, like you want to clear your mind, you don't want to think about anything. But actually that's not true at all. Like you want to just set your mind to like just be and let things flow in and out. And like
Right.
an idea, you don't try and block it. You don't try and hold on to it. You just like acknowledge that it's there and happen, and then you let it go.
Right.
And then like it's the same kind of thing, like say you're going for a walk, and sometimes like this one thing that I've been doing since I moved out here is like you have to drive to my schools. I don't have to, but I'm just kind of lazy sometimes. But there's one school that's a little further out, and it's like a 15-minute drive. It's not too far, but that drive, I used to play music in the car, and then because my car is really old and the CD and you have to use CDs because like they don't have like aux whatever. Anyway, so I had the CD, but the CD is like CD player is so old, so sometimes it like spits the CD out or it just doesn't play it. And so there were times where I'm doing this drive and it's just completely silent, and like there's kind of something about sometimes not distracting yourself with music or even with someone else. And it's those things like you're just alone with your own thoughts and your mind starts to wander. And those are those moments where whether you're driving or you're walking somewhere, you're walking your dog, but it's not like even if you have music, like depending what kind of music, it can still put you into that state. Like
for sure.
When it's just kind of there and it's not
almost like the state right before you fall asleep.
Yeah, that's what I think about a lot too. It's like,
well, one thing is funny to hear you say that, because like one thing I was thinking about when it comes to all these processes is like everything that we're talking about, is like kind of like, if I could just gesture, is like kind of like up here, you know what I mean? Like we're kind of talking about like engaging in creative stuff that kind of sets aside some of our normal conceptions about our experience, and the understanding that we can understand certain things like luck and creativity and getting ideas as obviously processes that are just, we only can kind of touch a little bit, or we kind of have to interact with in these like very non-direct ways. And one of the things I was thinking about with a lot of this stuff is, but I don't want to sound like immodest, but like I do a lot of things. And when people ask me about how it is that I'm able to do all that stuff, I mean, there's complicated answers and there's simpler answers, but at least the way that I conceptualize it is it's a cyclical process, not a linear process. And there's so many times when I'm talking to people about doing creative work, it doesn't matter if it's for clients, it doesn't matter if it's for like school or whatever, when they're thinking about it as a linear process, that it goes from like A to B to C to D to like a finished product. But it's like you're saying, it's like that meditative thing. It's a circular, cyclical process. There's no start, there's no end to it.
Yeah. It's just kind of happening.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like as a real, like, I look at this, I feel like such a nerd bringing up a piece of paper. Like, for example, like this way this kind of works, right, is this is like everything's in 3, right? I'm born on the 3rd day of the 3rd month of 1980, so 3 is very important to me. I got it tattooed on my arm. So everything's in 3 sections, right? There's a conceptual side of doing it, the physical side, and then there's like an analysis side. But it seems like a 1, 2, 3 step process, but it's actually like it's a cyclical process. You go back to 3, you start back over at 1 again.
Yeah. It just keeps going and going and going and going.
Keeps on going, yeah. And you think of it like more like you're not progressing linear, you're spiraling, right? Like you're kind of your life spirals in these ways. So it repeats over itself, but it kind of builds another layer as the years go by. This way I just think about it. Like I'm not saying that's how it is. That's how I conceptualize it in my head. And like all the stuff you're talking about, like that alpha state, like before you fall asleep, or like when you're meditating, or like you're saying, like when you're like all of a sudden realize that you're kind of like enjoying a drive in silence.
Yeah.
Me, those all cyclical processes. Like it's like, no, I can't really like, I can start those processes, but I can't like jump start any of the ideas that come out of them. Like I can only make opportunities for those ideas to show up by putting myself in those positions not or whatever.
So that was the thing, like I read